Welcome to Come Follow Me, week 29, where we explore the chapters Alma 30 and 31. So only two chapters, but these are about apostates, and they're really significant chapters in the Book of Mormon for justification about the gospel and how members of the church treat other people, particularly those who are disaffected. Alma chapter 30 talks about an antichrist called Korihor, and he's modeled really after the idea of the people of Nehor, which we've already talked about in Alma chapter 1, and about the Universalists. But this chapter goes on to a lot of greater detail. So Joseph is really expanding upon the idea of the Nehors with this antichrist rhetoric, and he's giving a lot more detail, a lot more arguments against this kind of anti-Christian rhetoric. And the chapter starts off with a caveat in that you can't punish anybody for their belief. And this is really important because people are on equal grounds when it comes to their belief. Their actions may be judgeable, but their beliefs, their things that they think, that they desire, those things can't be touched. Because people have to exist on equal grounds. This is the foundation of America. This is the basis by which you can believe what you want. And this is a really important thing. And the chapter goes into details of how Korihor is fighting against the ideas of religion. And these are very much in keeping with the Enlightenment arguments of its day. The understanding that these traditions are foolish. The idea of Christ who saves is kind of really archaic. But instead, people fared according to the management of the creature, which is a very 19th century term, which suggests that people are in charge of their own destiny by how hard they work. Very Protestant work ethic, but the idea that actually God's not really that interested. And we see the idea of the Nehor Universalist idea that there is no crime, because if you're just working and living, there's nothing that you should be accountable for. And it wasn't that Universalists believed that you could do anything. It was just that they believed that God, in his infinite wisdom and mercy, would save everybody. So these kind of arguments against Universalists that are present in Alma chapter 30 are very rhetoric that Christians had against Universalists. And we see the same kind of arguments back that we see in the church today. The idea that, why are you upsetting these people? They are rejoicing in their belief. Why are you trying to tell them that their beliefs are foolish? And there's a big deal about the idea that people should not be paid, that priests should not be paid in the Book of Mormon. This is priestcrafts, and Alma is contending that there is no such thing as priestcrafts because they are doing this out of the goodness of their heart. They're not being paid. And Korihor makes some good arguments, the idea that people aren't fallen, that they're not guilty because of something their parents had done. And there's no way to know if there's a Christ or how to save, because that's a miraculous experience. It doesn't really have any basis in reality. And the idea that God is never seen and never will be, so why are you giving him so much power in your life? But to Alma and to Joseph, this is blasphemous because everything denotes there is a God. Creation suggests that there is. And Alma contends that they don't glut themselves with the labors of the people, that they work with them. So this priestcraft idea is not present in the true living church, but that they labor for the rejoicing on the joy of our brethren. And that is the reward that they have. And these are the kinds of things that believers do trot out, the idea that everything denotes that God exists because creation is ordered, and also that they have this internal testimony of belief, which gives them an understanding that God is there. And these are all very subjective things, in which Korihor is kind of recounting against. And there's a trope that Korihor's got this lying spirit because he won't see these evidences of testimony and creation. And so he asks for a sign, and Alma gives him a sign. He's struck dumb. And there's a lot of repetition in this chapter, so you just see it coming over and over again, the same points. And we see that same rhetoric from Laban, the idea that it's better that one man perish than a nation dwindle in unbelief. And so Korihor is struck dumb by God. And then we see the chapter become illogical because Korihor writes and says, I've been deceived. An angel came and told me that that there is no God. And so this is bizarre because, of course, if an angel came, that's a supernatural experience, so you should have a God. It's just the idea that you can be deceived by Satan and claim that there is no God. It's just a little bit out there. And this curse that's put on Korihor is a mark which shows other people that he's unrighteous and he's cast out. And then in the end, Korihor is run down, trodden over, and dies. And this is a great cautionary tale that anybody who fights against God is going to get his punishment. And this chapter is used again and again in the church to denote those antichrists, the idea that people who are fighting against God, who are deceived and leave the fold, are going to be a cautionary tale to you. And this doesn't actually happen in real life, but it is a real trope that is trotted out every time somebody feels attacked by some logic which doesn't match the church. And something else to note is that this story is used again, but in a cut down version, for Sherem in Jacob chapter 7. Alma 31 is also about apostates and antichrists, but this time it's talking about dissenters and whole groups of people. And interestingly, these dissenters are Zoramites, so they're labelled after Nephi's friend, who was the servant of Laban. These Zoramites are perverting the ways of the Lord. They're bowing down to idols, and they're causing the rest of the Nephites a lot of concern because they're worried that they might join with the Lamanites against the Nephites. There is a real concern that they will enter into a correspondence with the Lamanites, and this is indicative of a fully literate society, which we know does not exist in this time period. So it's completely anachronistic, and we see this with Korihor in the last chapter, that he's able to write things down. Written language is the basis of this community, which is really interesting because this is totally a 19th century understanding of the way that people communicate. And Alma is going to use his preaching and go out to the people because there's an understanding that preaching is the way that people come to Christ. These Zoramites are dissenters, and they've fallen into great errors, and they don't observe the performances of the church. The idea that you should continue in prayer and supplication to God daily. Their worship is once a week and nothing else. And their worship is marked by this idea of going up in front of people and bearing your testimony in a really particular kind of way, in that they believe that God is a spirit, that there is no Christ, and that they are really special. They've been elected to be the most holy. They are chosen. They're rebelling against the foolish traditions of Jesus Christ, and they just continue to reiterate that idea that they are special, that they're chosen of God, that they are the only true and living church. And this is called a Rameumptom. And upon this tower, they enact the same prayer to each other to confirm their belief. And this is very reminiscent of LDS practice of fast and testimony meeting, where people tend to say the same kinds of testimonies to reaffirm their belief to each other, which is really interesting that this is never talked about in conference, I guess because it's so close to what we actually practice this day and age. And their great sin is that they do this once a week and then they don't do it again till the next week, where God and Jesus and Joseph really are about the idea that this is a daily practice, that you continually act in prayer with deity so that you can keep the commandments and keep the Spirit in your hearts. And because this is only a weekly experience, they are also wicked and perverse, that their hearts are set on gold and silver and precious things. And we see this chapter go over and over the same kinds of details, including this being chosen part. But towards the end of the chapter is another soliloquy by Alma, and he supplicates and prays to God about the wickedness of the people. And this is a repeated prayer that suggests that he's kind of calling those who are going to go with him to preach against the Zoramites and give them power. And then we see in verse 36